Hello, everyone. My name is Martha Bueno, and this is Latin Libertarians. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Zach Foster. Good evening, Mr. Zach. How are you tonight?
Well, Mama never said there would be days like this.
Ain't that the truth? So I know that there's probably a few libertarians that might have heard that we were just on Spike Cohen's show, and now here we are. Pulling a double duty tonight. So we hope that you'll bear with us. If you didn't hear us on Spike Cohen's show and you're just catching up, we are going to be talking about all things Cuba tonight. The big news story, and it happens to be the country that my parents are from, the country that I'm from. And Zach has a very big connection to Cuba as well, has been a huge voice for the Cubans on the island with the Libertarian Party there for many, 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 many years. And he's also helped out a lot with issues on Cuba. So let's start off, Zach, with what's going on in Cuba. Let's just do this quickly because I know a lot of people have been following this issue and I just don't want to bore them with those details. We have so much to talk about tonight.
Historic protests at an intensity and a critical mass that have never been seen before in Cuba.
Wow, that was really concise. Okay, yes. So there are mass protests in Cuba, and these are different than before. And let's just touch on some of the reasons why. There's economic reasons, there's health reasons, why this is a big deal right now, right? So you want to go ahead and start us off with the different reasons why now this is like the perfect storm of what's going on?
Well, for starters, if any of you have ever read any of the 500 books published by the Mises Institute, there's this thing called Soviet-style socialism, which even though the Soviet Union has gone into the dustbin of history, Cuba is still very much enthusiastically applying that. Well, excuse me, the Cuban one-party state is enthusiastically applying that model. We have to break ourselves from this habit about talking about a government like with the name of the country, because that's a disservice to the people from that country. For example, we never had issues with the people of Afghanistan. After 9/11, our government and a lot of very zealous patriots in this country had a problem specifically with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And here in Cuba, we're not talking about Cuba as an entity. We're talking about the Cuban regime and then the critical majority of the Cuban people who are protesting. And those are two very different things. They are not the same.
Absolutely. And so some of the other issues going on with Cuba, obviously COVID has affected all of us, right? And especially on an island where people just already didn't have access to quality healthcare. I know that we talk a lot about that, especially.
The healthcare is terrible, but at least it's free.
Yes, yes. And so speaking to that, if you don't mind, I do have some pictures that were shared from a hospital in Cuba. And these are confirmed pictures from the inside of the hospital that I really would like to. So this is first and foremost, that's the outside of the hospital. So it's not too shabby looking.
Looks not too shabby on the outside.
Right.
Got a nice facade.
So, and then here are I'm sorry, I wish I had a way to just share these successfully, one right after the other, but unfortunately this program is just not conducive
to that. You gotta close one thing and open up another.
Yes, unfortunately. So this is just, so far it looks really nice. It's not too shabby. Let me go on to the next one. Sorry, guys. Pardon me.
Let's go a little farther inside this hospital.
Let's see what it looks.
Let's see what Michael Moore fantasizes about.
Oh boy, really? That we're gonna go there with Michael Moore?
Might as well. We might as well just anticipate. Ooh.
Here we're looking at a hospital bed. Now you'll notice that there's a patient in the bed or something, and there's no sheets. There's also not really a bed. That's a metal frame. There's stuff coming. It's just there's not even where to hook up their back. I mean, it's
I don't know what the hell that is dripping from the bed onto the footstool.
Yeah, it's absolutely and this person's actually lucky, I want to say, because there are plenty of pictures of people in Cuba in hospitals right now because of COVID laying on the floor, like straight up laying on the floor of the lobby of the of the hallways, wherever they can fit them. And there's God, I don't even know where to go with this. It's just, it's absolutely horrific. I'll share one more just because this is such a pain to share so many different pictures. But it's pretty bad. It is absolutely disgusting in these hospitals. And this isn't like, one hospital that is bad. This is what the hospitals in Cuba, unfortunately, look like. You can see their equipment is just disgusting and ew. I mean, even the worst hospitals in America don't look like this. Like, we don't have this problem here in America where it's this bad. And so this is what's going on in Cuba. They had this crisis with COVID. They have a crisis of lack of food. They have a crisis of lack of medicines. They have a crisis of they removed the dollar and now it's on the euro. And so many things came together all at once.
What Bitcoin is for you compared to the US dollar, the US dollar is to the Cuban peso. It is the primary stable currency used by Cubans on the island. It's the only thing that allows people to save up enough to be able to buy a few groceries or cell phone minutes, because a lot of times people got to make a choice. And it's a very crappy choice to have to make.
So Eric is saying that the best way to present COVID rates is per capita. Cuba is more than 2 times per capita versus even UK, where Delta variant has been a concern. Yeah, I agree. The rates of COVID are extremely high in Cuba. And one of the main reasons for that, I was showing you guys the pictures of the hospitals, but beyond the hospitals just being disgusting, people in the hospitals in Cuba don't get fed. So they don't get fed food from the hospital. So you can imagine if your loved one has to come in. Here in America, we weren't allowed to be with our loved ones when they were sick with COVID in the hospital. But in Cuba, you have to go. You have to go every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner if you're going to take something to your family member. So you have all these people coming in and out with the COVID patient. Obviously, it's going to spread. And people in Cuba have to go make lines every day for their food. It's not like America that you can go to the supermarket and buy a week's worth of food or, your necessities. You must go every day because there's just not enough. And people don't have the ability to buy enough. So
and we're talking about an added risk of people being immunocompromised because they're chronically malnourished.
Right. So I made this point earlier in the night, and I'm going to just make it again. When Michael Moore went into the Cuban hospitals and said, they're wonderful. He went to the one hospital in Havana that is very nice. It is for the elite and for people from outside of Cuba who go to Cuba for medical treatments. That one is absolutely beautiful. But what he did was show up at that hospital and say, look at this beautiful healthcare system. Imagine people complaining about this. That is like going to Cancun and saying that is how Mexicans live everywhere. Everybody just lives on the beach and enjoying life in an all-inclusive resort. And we know that that's not the truth. That's not the reality. So that's what's going on in Cuba right now. People this past Sunday, July 11th, decided enough was enough. And they went out into the streets and they have been protesting nonstop since then. But then again, the non-elected Cuban president, Miguel Díaz-Canel, has declared a civil war pretty much against his people. What did he say, Zach?
If you want to, the rough translation, because he uses some Cuban slang, if you want to mess with the revolution, you'll have to come over our dead bodies.
Basically.
Now, mind you, only his side has guns, but yeah.
Yeah, and we're not going to share the videos of people getting shot on this show. However, they're out there. A lot of our people we know, people we care about, have been sharing videos that are happening on the island of people, of police, of the Cuban state police coming into their homes and taking people and shooting people and hurting people. So this is serious. And again, as Zach just mentioned, only one side has guns. There's not much you can do, with rocks and stuff like they have. And I've seen some videos also of Cubans here, especially in Miami, sharing videos on how to make Molotov cocktails and stuff, which is funny, but not really. I've been seeing a lot of people even saying that they don't have access at the moment to kerosene. So even that,
how are they supposed to make the cocktail?
Right. How can you even make a Molotov cocktail if you don't even have, you know, kerosene. So it is absolutely horrific. And we are watching, I don't know, what can we call this? Just people being murdered. And there's nothing
It's
Americans we
people being murdered. I would call it a massacre. The regime has already started using Tiananmen Square style tactics to repress people. I have seen multiple people shot.
Yes, I have as well. I actually posted a video that today got Facebook was so kind to now censor it and say it's sensitive content, and it's a police officer just beating up a protester. So absolutely, there's a lot going on. Yes, human rights are being violated, and you know, when people are like, well, but they have the best literacy and the best, medical. No, they don't have the best medical, and their literacy rates before Castro were just as high as they are now. So neither of those are examples of the wonderfulness of communism or socialism or anything of the such. I want to just put that up there because, yes, George, you are absolutely correct. That is why, as libertarians, we spend our time telling people, no, our guns matter. They matter a lot. You're not going to come and take them because this is what we fear. We've seen it over and over and over again. So this is exactly what we fear. So we've seen days of protest, and the protests are getting more intense. Or better yet, the reaction from the government. The first day of protests were mostly peaceful. Yeah, some people, you know, obviously the police were beating up people, which is not peaceful, but they were mostly peaceful. The Cubans got, you know, had the element of surprise. But now at this point, the army that was in Venezuela is back in Cuba, and with orders to hurt the people. So we're seeing things intensify there. Zach, we have libertarians on the island. There is a groups of libertarians, believe it or not, even though political parties are prohibited in Cuba. There is a Cuban Libertarian Party, and we have very sad news regarding that front. Zach, if you would please kindly do the honors and share.
We have had radio silence from all members of the Cuban LP since the evening of the first day of the protests. It is confirmed that at least one libertarian has been disappeared, although we've been arguing that it's been two. The person who is on the list, and there are now human rights NGOs, very reputable human rights NGOs, different ones who have made lists based on denunciation from their direct contact with people on the island. And Cuban Libertarian Party member Marisol Peña from the province of Camagüey was arrested very violently at her home on the morning of the 12th, along with her husband, Jose Luis Acosta. Both of them are members of the LP. The police broke the door open after gathering forces in front of the house for several hours. Then around 10:30, 11 in the morning, they busted open the door. I'm not going to beat around the bush, folks. They beat the absolute crap out of both of them. There were neighbors and friends who were witnesses of this, people watching from their windows, watching from their front yard. So Marisol is totally disappeared. Nobody has had any word from her. Her relatives have tried to go to the police station where she was last seen 2 days ago to get information, but there's no proof of life, no type of contact whatsoever. In addition to Marisol and her husband being unaccounted for, Marisol's 7-year-old daughter, Catherine, has also been missing. All the relatives have been frantically searching for the child because the child has also been missing since the time when her mother and stepfather were taken away. In addition, the last thing that we heard from the libertarians in Havana was Sunday evening. They were going back out to protest, and then the regime started cutting social media on the island, and then they started cutting the encrypted communication apps. So Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, all of that is down. Instagram and Twitter is down. Some people on the island have been able to connect with the use of a VPN, but a lot of people just haven't gotten there yet. And I'm sorry, but with no communication, it's too late to start training them now. And what we do know from the sector of Havana, where most of the Havana libertarians live, it's a municipality called Arroyo Naranjo. Yesterday, protesters stormed the police station and briefly occupied it. I don't know if they still hold it, but personally, I doubt it, because wherever the protesters have been making huge gains, the regime will then send troops. We're past police, but they're sending the infantry after these people, and then it's kind of like whack-a-mole. People will take over a government building in one area, and then they'll send the army there, and then in another area, people will come out and then do the same thing, and then they got to send other troops there. So it's constantly whack-a-mole, but we have not heard anything from the Havana libertarians. We just know that the proverbial what was flying in their neighborhood specifically yesterday. But again, I got no idea if they were caught up in the events of yesterday or if they were arrested on day one at nighttime or somewhere in between.
And her daughter is missing as well. So of Marisol's daughter is missing. Nobody in the family knows.
That's Camagüey province, and what I was just talking about with the police station, that's Havana. So these are two different regions of the country.
Right, but
in all 6 provinces where there are Libertarian Party members, it's total radio silence.
Absolutely. And the Cuban government, as you mentioned, cut all internet communication, cut even landlines, and they already had problems keeping power on. So most Cubans get anywhere from maybe 2 hours to a max of 6 hours a day of electricity. And so now it's pretty much worse. And there are days, entire days, that people go without having any electricity. So of course, keeping these electronic devices charged is another issue, and so on. So communication to the island. We can't hear you, Zach.
Even if you do have means to do a VPN connection in Cuba, that's assuming that you've got a phone battery or that you had electricity last night to charge your phone for this morning.
That's correct. So I saw in the comments somebody was saying about a politician here in the United States that's saying that we should bomb Cuba. I do have that available so that I can show. Right here. That is actually my hometown. This is from Newsweek, Newsweek, and it is Miami Mayor Francis Suarez. There's his face, and yes, he was in an interview and he said that bombing Cuba is something that can be discussed and needs to stay on the table. So, American
How is it that the only time when American mayors, like city mayors, have a foreign policy, it has something to do with a communist country?
I think he is a Cuban American, and so obviously this is why he's speaking out about this issue. But I think that he fails to see that where would we bomb in Cuba? All of the police stations are exactly in neighborhoods. Are we just going to kill our people? So so Francis is a Republican, and then we have another Republican, Marco Rubio, who is also a Cuban American, who has another take on the issue. And his take is he wants the Biden administration and United Nations to immediately get involved. So we have, 2 war hawks basically on this issue. And then, Zach, we also have, let's see, we have Bob Menendez and Alejandro Mayorkas, and they both said what?
Senator Menendez said there will be no military intervention in Cuba, period. A lot of Cuban Americans and Cubans on the island feel very betrayed by this because Bob Menendez is ethnically Cuban. I'm not passing judgment on the statement. I'm communicating to you guys what the statement was and how people are reacting to it. And then Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, said to all the Cubans, do not come to the United States. If you come to the United States, the Coast Guard will turn you away.
Right. So here are all
which is a hell of a thing to say to people during a national crisis like this one.
Right. So if you manage to leave your island and want to find safe harbor, don't come to the United States. We're just not going to take you.
And he's Cuban too.
Right. Absolutely. So he's telling us you're not coming here. Marco Rubio and Miami Mayor Francis Suarez are saying we might just bomb you. I mean, Republicans are all over the place. And where are Democrats in this issue? Have we heard from them?
Well, that's Menendez. Menendez and probably Mayorkas, being part of the Biden administration, are Democrats. So the Democratic response is either we ain't going to do anything, or don't come here, or we'll send you back to that nightmare. Whereas the Republicans want to bomb everything. And this is, well, it's madness. It's lunacy. Oh, and then of course you've got the Sandersites and the AOCites and all the DSA folks. Everybody who says that they're in love with Sweden and Norway, but really they're talking about Cuba and Venezuela. All of those folks are having embargo Tourette's right now. Even though most people who name drop the embargo actually don't know what the embargo is or what it affects.
Absolutely. Yes, Brian, we understand that what America, those flags waved in Hong Kong and in Cuba represent an America that was, not the one that is currently. So here we are, Zach. We have all of these issues, this bubbling up in Cuba going on. Where do we go from here? How can Americans help? Because that's the number one thing I hear from people is, how can we help? We all want to help. What's the problem with us being able to help?
You're not allowed to.
Basically, yeah. The biggest thing stopping Americans from being able to help Cubans, which is 90 miles from our coasts in southern Florida.
Now, scratch that, because that's sounding interventionist. The biggest thing stopping 1.3 million ethnic Cubans in the United States from helping their blood relatives is the United States government.
Yes, and what we're talking about.
So I'm not saying like let's go do a crusade and I don't know, let's throw a country at the dartboard. Eritrea, the North Korea of Africa. Nobody's saying we as free individuals should go intervene in Eritrea right now. No. These are Cubans and Cuban Americans who want to go do something to help their blood relatives. This time it's different. Nobody here is saying, hey, US, the US should do something. The question that we are trying to answer is, what can we do as people?
And we as people can do nothing, because there is a law in place currently in the United States that was a proclamation done by Bill Clinton in 1996 after the Hermanos al Rescate issue, which plane from a group of Cubans who wanted to help on the island was shot down by the Cuban government. And so what did we do in the United States as a response? We issued this proclamation, which is proclamation, I always get the number confused in my head. It is 6867. And this proclamation prohibits Americans from going into Cuban waters. Why is this important? Why should we care? It is my belief that if our government, who is the only person or the only entity that can make a decision to intervene in Cuba, which is not what we are asking for, as Zach mentioned, we do not think that the United States government should be involved in Cuba. They should not be. But if we as American citizens decide that we want to help our family in Cuba and we happen to make it there, when we come back to the United States, we will be prosecuted. And I think that is such a cruel, cruel thing to do to people.
Now, the way that you said it would kind of lead people to believe that we would be prosecuted if we jumped onto a high-powered fishing boat with a bunch of rifles, and then we showed up at a Cuban town, and then we shot it out with the cops, and then we came back home. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if you have food and medicine packed in a boat, and you are ready to take your boat to Cuban waters to go give it to some Cuban people who are absolutely desperate, even if nothing on their side stops you, just from entering Cuban waters and giving people that food and medicine, for entering for any reason, you will be prosecuted when you come back, which is absolutely insane, because with any other country, when a foreign and unidentified vessel enters a particular country's waters, their Navy or their Coast Guard will say on the radio traffic, identify yourself, and then they will either give them instructions of where to dock so that they can do customs, or they will send a Coast Guard ship to escort them to the edge of their national waters and tell them to stay the hell out. That's the way it works for every other country. It's up to them to let you come or to make you leave. But here in the U.S., they're already telling us you will not go. And I mean, they weren't doing that for your Irish Americans and your Italian Americans and your Black Americans of not Latino ancestry. When they made that proclamation and they reiterate that today, they're talking to Cuban Americans. They're telling them you will not you will not go and help your blood relatives. You're not allowed. You have to watch them be slaughtered on a live stream.
In 2019, when Hong Kong was protesting, they didn't stop us from going to Hong Kong. As an American citizen, you could go there, even though that was.
How do you think all those journalists got there?
Right. Well, I was there when the protests happened. I was there. So, it's insane to me that our country, that we claim to be free, but we're not actually free. We can't actually make a decision and go help our family members. And instead, I, as a Cuban, who's sitting here in the comfort of my own home with Wi-Fi, being able to watch from a screen as my people are being murdered, and there's absolutely nothing I can do. And if anybody is in Miami or is watching news from Miami, you'll know that Cubans are shutting down our expressways. They are shutting down our infrastructure. People aren't going to work because we want to go do something for our people. We can't just sit here and watch as they're being murdered. It is insanity that our country is doing this to us. And of course, I'm not saying that we're going to go over there and bring arms, like Zach said, and I'm not saying that we're going to go do these things, but there should be a way for us to be able to guarantee that the people protesting have some sort of backup in terms of, even if it's just some bodyguard, something, because our people are getting murdered, and they're getting murdered while we're all sitting here watching. And I'm kind of going into a rant because it really fires me up. It is very difficult to be in this situation and watch and not be able to do absolutely anything. And I want to say thank you to everybody who has reached out to me and said that they want to help. I know that there's so many amazing people in this party that have absolutely offered money and assistance and all sorts of things. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And I promise that as soon as we hear something we can do to help, we will get it to you. In the meantime, we're all in the same literal boat or figurative boat where
we're all in the same literal boat, and it's docked just outside of Cuban waters.
Yep. Basically, and figurative. We're all sitting ducks here just waiting for something to go down. And this law will stay in place even if these protesters are successful and manage to liberate the island. That proclamation is still in place. So just keep that in mind. We can start asking for it to be removed, even if we don't think we should be going there, because, we're thinking it's probably gonna end. There's no way that the Cuban regime can go on past this, unless, of course, they are successful in murdering their population.
Well, that is why they started deploying the infantry against the people, because the first day it was just the police. And then day 2, it was the police and the committees for the defense of the revolution, which are like these civilian paramilitary parapolice groups. They don't have a uniform, they don't have a badge, but whenever the revolution, which is the regime, needs them, they will get activated, and then they have special permission, special authorization to commit violence. So day 1, it was just the cops. Day 2, it was the cops and the committees for the defense of the revolution. Day 3, they started sending the infantry against the people, plus the cops. That's when they started shooting people with live ammunition. Actually, started shooting people at the end of day 2, but day 3 is when it became very commonplace from coast to coast. And then today, the Cuban regime is having to. This is the first time in years that this regime has had to start pulling its occupation troops out of Venezuela, because a lot of folks don't know this, but there are about 45,000 Cuban regulars in Venezuela. They're wearing Venezuelan uniforms. Most of them are trained in how to speak in the Venezuelan dialect because they learned from the PR nightmare that is every photograph of an American soldier searching these Muslim civilians in Iraq and Afghanistan and other countries. So to avoid that, they make the best of it. It is an invisible occupation force, but it is very much there. If you guys want more information, if you guys want photographic evidence, if you guys want names, if you guys want unit designations of which Cuban troops have been in Venezuela, there is a report that you guys can download for free. You can look for it on Google. It's called Cubazuela, Chronicle of a Cuban Intervention. And it is about how the Cuban regime used unconventional warfare tactics and also politics to conquer a country. Anyway, this is the first time that they're having to bring their foreign occupation troops home to the island to repress people because the protests have reached such a critical mass that the regime is the legs are starting to wobble. I'm not going to say that the downfall of the regime is imminent because right now it is still too early to say that. But what we have seen yesterday is that in several points around the country, protesters overran and took over several police stations. This was in different places. One of the places where that happened was in the neighborhood of Arroyo Naranjo in Havana, where most of the Havana LP lives. That's one reason why I'm very worried about them. As far as I know, the protesters don't still hold police stations. What they'll do is they'll overwhelm one place. They'll protest in front, and when they send the line of the cops out or the committees for the defense of the revolution, then they start kind of doing the shoving match. And then that's usually when things escalate. And as soon as the cops whip out the nightsticks and start beating people, that's when people have been starting to brawl back. So the police, they're the ones with the weapons, whereas the Cuban people are like using bricks, sticks, whatever they can. A lot of them are still trying to be peaceful, though. Anyway, from that point of escalation, they'll actually start pushing their way past and making their way into the police stations, and then they'll hold them for a while. Then the regime will send reinforcements to go take it back. So in one area, when one uprising is being subdued, it's like whack-a-mole. Another one starts somewhere else. Then they send troops or the police to go crush that one. Then another one starts somewhere else. So it's very much like whack-a-mole. And then it's culminated in today, the vice minister of the Interior Ministry, which is kind of like their version of Homeland Security. And that's the ministry that oversees state security, which is the political police, the secret police. The vice minister of that department resigned today because, out of conscience, he does not agree with the regime's hyper-violent response to the protesters. Now, let me qualify that. This isn't a guy who's had a conscience his whole life. He has been a loyal Communist Party member for years. His political police have repressed protesters for years. The difference is, in the past, they would go there with several police officers, beat the crap out of a dissident, like any member of the Libertarian Party or any of the other dozens of dissident groups, just beat the crap out of them and then haul them off to jail. In most cases, the dude gets released in 24 hours, and that was about it. In other cases, they would go to a labor prison. But nowadays, police officers and soldiers are bursting open the doors of people's homes and either beating and dragging people away to be detained or straight up summarily executing people in their homes. I have watched several summary executions that have happened on the island in the last 24 hours.
This, I just want to share it briefly. It's was shared on social media. This is just a young girl on the street. The family saying she's just a little girl, and this is what police do to children. Lots of children, teenagers, have been taken from their homes and from the street. The theory is that they're being used, sent off to force military. I guess they need more military or whatnot, but children are just being yanked on the streets. I mean, what is going on there is absolutely horrific. And this isn't even, like I said, I didn't want to share anything too graphic on this show. I really don't want that out there. It's sad. It's painful to watch. It is there. And I do urge people to go seek that information. But I did not want to share the really graphic stuff. So this is a young girl that people around her said, stop, stop, stop. And they didn't take her. But this is the type of stuff that people in Cuba are dealing with. I can share very briefly where the protests began. So this is the first day of protest in, I believe this is Havana. And what people are screaming here, Patria y Vida, it means country and life, which is the absolute opposite of what Castro's slogan was. Let me just lower that a bit more. So Castro's slogan was patria o muerte, so country or death. And so Patria y Vida is a song that was made popular now here or within the community. And this is one of the chants from the Cuban people.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be about your country or death. What these people are all about is country and life.
Right. Country and life. They can have both. They can have their beautiful country and they can have a life. It does not have to be one or the other. And, most people born now or in Cuba now are born after the revolution. They don't have those notions of this idea, the system. And up until 2018, up until they had access to the internet, before they had access to the internet, rather, people just didn't know. They were brainwashed and indoctrinated into believing that this was the best country in the world. And it's very hard to keep up that charade now that they have access to the internet, because it's one thing to be told that you have the best country in the world when you can't get any food and any access to things. And then you're able to take your smartphone out and take a look at supermarkets around the world. I mean, I love to travel. I've been lots of places and I've never found a supermarket completely empty. And that's the situation in Cuba. There is nowhere to buy goods. And I'm talking about basic goods. One of the things that we hear here in Miami when Cubans just make it to America and they go to the supermarket, for example, and they'll say things like, how do you choose a brand of toothpaste when your entire life all you get is whatever there is, if there is any? How do you choose a brand of soap? So these are concepts that I think for Americans, it's hard to understand why it is Cubans are so frustrated and so done with this regime. And I agree with you, Zach, it's too early to say that this is it, but I can't imagine a world where Cubans are just going to go back to allowing the government to repress them. Of course, as you said, the might of the gun it's scary. So hopefully we see a change, and hopefully the biggest change we see is right here in the United States. So for those, again, that want to help Cuba, the best thing we can do is to ask the administration to remove proclamation. What is it?
68, 67.
I swear it's just a problem for me. And so that is one of the big things I think that we can do for the island is to remove our inability to help. And that's just something that, if you'd permit me a few minutes here, I just think that it is absolutely crazy that people get to make the decision for us, for the, for Cuban Americans, for Cubans, if we're going to go intervene or not. Biden has no connections to this island. Most people who make the decisions on whether to use our military, whether, to do these things, they have no connection. The only people that can make the decision to go in there and change things happen to be elected to office. And now everyone that's watching this, please don't come, well, we're libertarians. I agree, we are libertarians. I'm not saying that we should go in and intervene militarily, but I am saying, think about it for a minute. The only people that can make a decision for this island are people in power in this country. We Cubans here in Miami cannot decide to go and help. And we can't even take humanitarian aid because through the history of Cuba, when humanitarian aid is sent to the island, the Cuban government takes it and sells it to their people. So right now, sending humanitarian aid is...
You think you're giving 30,000, whatever it is, boxes of baby formula, diapers, aspirin, toothpaste, insulin for diabetic people. You think you're giving people a gift. And in most cases, what you think you are sending them as a gift will be sold back to them in dollars or in euros. And the average Cuban makes between 30 and 40 US dollars a month on a blue collar salary, which, the country is primarily blue collar because That was one of the points of the revolution, was for everybody to be a peasant, urban and rural. Now, the promises of the Cuban Revolution were an increase in the standard of living. Also, this thing called liberal democracy, civil rights, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom to own a piece of private property, all those things. Those promises were betrayed a long time ago, and that's one of the reason why in the Cuban Civil War in the 1960s. So first there was the war to overthrow Batista, which is how Castro came to power. Because of the multiple warlords, he was the one that did politics the best, in addition to military stuff. But there are reasons why most, excuse me, not most, but a huge number of officers and soldiers in Castro's guerrilla army, and asterisk, throughout the war against Batista, Castro only had about 300 guerrillas. Then there were a couple of hundred more radicals in the cities. And then there were 5 or 6 other different guerrilla groups with anywhere between 50 to 200 guys each at the very most. So just small numbers of people brought down Batista. But of the people who fought with Castro or for Castro, many of them fought against him in the next civil war, which was happening during the 1960s. That was called the Escambray Rebellion. So even people who fought for the Cuban Revolution fought against Castro in the 60s to what they thought was course correcting the Cuban Revolution. They did believe in the Cuban Revolution. They did not believe in Marxism Leninism. That still took another year or two before the state became fully Marxist Leninist. But the promises of the Cuban Revolution were broken a long time ago. A lot of the wonderful things that you guys have heard about what the Cuban government does for its people are just not true. I'm in a position to know this not only because I've met so many people who have fled from Cuba to live here, and they're not even, dude, they're not even right wing anymore. A lot of people who just barely get here, like, yeah, a lot of them are right wing, but others will say, well, communism is bad, but the government should still be providing all these other things. So people have been living under a certain version of socialism over there for so long. They're not even right wing anymore for the most part. A ton of Cubans over here vote Democrats. So really, how right wing are they? Compared to your Cuban American who likes Trump. And I've also I can't even tell you how many times money I've spent on the Cuban libertarians. I've got a count of how much after the Mises Bombay Institute started. But as far as things like sending money to Libertarian Party members so that they could buy food, because a lot of them are politically persecuted, so they're not given licenses for their small businesses. Whenever they get hired for a job, their employer will be pressured by the police to fire that person. A lot of times, remittances, they have to go, well, when Western Union was still operating, they would have to go into the Western Union office with witnesses. Otherwise, the police would pressure people to make their money disappear, all kinds of horrible things. Then there were Cuban LP members who spent 4 years in a labor prison. That was Ubaldo Herrera Hernandez. He was sent to a labor prison back in February of 2017. The crime that he was arrested under, the alleged crime, was attempted assault of a police officer, which is total BS. But by the time he actually got in front of the kangaroo court, his charge had been changed to distributing enemy propaganda. And that enemy propaganda was, correct me if I'm wrong, a Spanish translation of Murray Rothbard's Towards a New Liberty. That was the enemy propaganda that they gave this guy 4 years in a labor prison for. And another libertarian, Manuel Velasquez, he did a year in a labor prison. Then there's Cuban Libertarian Party member, former secretary of the party in Havana, Janet Padron, 29 years old. In 2017, on July 4th, she posed with a photo of an American flag. There are a lot of Cubans on the island who have bootleg American flags. That is a real thing, and it's not easy to get them. When people do get them, they're either homemade or they're imported, but very tattered. Oh, holy cannoli. Are you guys still seeing me?
We see you.
All right, sorry. Some another program popped up on my phone and took things over real quick. Anyway, Janet Padron, for taking that photo in front of the American flag, and they do it as a means of protest. it does not mean America is so great. It really means screw you, screw you, communist government. So for being in this photograph, she was actually arrested a year later on July 4th before she was able to take another photograph. And then she was sentenced to a year. She ended up doing 7 months in prison. So her mother had to take care of her 10-year-old son during that time. Who else? Nelson Rodriguez Chartrand, one of the co-founders of the Cuban Libertarian Party. I remember the guy asked me after I started getting involved with this small group in Havana called the Mises Cuba Book Club. I was talking with Nelson probably every day. And about 3 months into it, he asked me, well, we're starting to get momentum. More people are joining the group. The government's increasing their level of repression with this. Where do we go with this? Where do we go with this? And I said, I think you should start a political party. And within 7 days, they founded the Cuban Libertarian Party in Havana on May 7th, 2017. A lot of people in the American Party were very polite. They kept their cynicism to themselves, but later on, a lot of people communicated to me privately that they expected this group to be totally annihilated and wiped from the face of the earth. But 4 years and 2 months in, the Cuban Libertarian Party still exists, although with these recent historic protests, again, we have had total radio silence from the entire Havana LP since Sunday night. And then 2 members of the Camagüey Libertarian Party are totally disappeared, plus a child, Marisol's child. Nobody has seen that 7-year-old child in several days.
That's absolutely horrific. And we could spend days going on and on and on about these people taken for having a political ideology that is different than the main island. If you think of anything, if you even spoke about something different than the regime, you could be sent to a prison camp. For those that maybe know my history or not, my father was a political prisoner in Cuba for the crime of attempting to leave. He didn't agree with the Castro regime, did not want to stay, did not see a future as a young man at the time. And when he attempted to leave, his first attempt to leave failed. And unfortunately, he was taken to jail he was given a 6 to 8 year sentence for trying to leave Cuba. And at the beginning, he was in an actual jail, but then he was sent to a prison camp.
That is one hell of a possessive relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, I think about that.
I don't think I've ever dated anybody that crazy.
I mean, I think about it often when I'm about to take off on an airplane. We get to leave the United States and go travel the world and come back. And in Cuba, that's just not a reality, besides the fact that they don't have money to do so. They just can't leave their country. It's not like they can go travel and enjoy. Unless you're, of course, part of the elite. Sandro Castro, there was a video going around just a few months ago of one of Castro's grandsons driving around.
Fidel's grandson.
Yeah, driving around in a Mercedes. Now, it was a 2012 Mercedes, and a lot of people here are like, well, that's not even like a great car. For Cuba, that's an amazing car. We're talking about
where everybody else has like a 1956 Packard.
If you have a car
with the engine that's been totally. That's if you have a car, because a lot of folks there's one car and that's like the block car or the neighborhood car. But yeah, the only cars available in Cuba right now are this really old stuff. And again, the embargo, Cuba could buy cars. That central government could buy cars from anywhere in the world. They do. That's how all the Castros got their Mercedes, plus their yachts, plus their Ukrainian sex worker bodyguards, all types of absolute craziness. The thing is, most car companies do not want to do credit in general with low quality, low confidence governments. And then the embargo, the one thing that it stops financial institutions abroad from doing is extending credit to the Cuban government if they want to continue having a financial relationship with the U.S. government. Because a lot of these companies, they do, their most important customer is not you and me, it's Uncle Sam. The companies who made the debit cards for the last stimulus payments, things like that. A lot of these financial companies, Uncle Sam is their most important customer. They still have the option to do business in cash with Cuba, But again, it is a low confidence regime. It's considered a deadbeat regime. So a lot of times they just don't pay their bills. And even if they could extend credit to that regime, most companies don't want to because, again, it's a deadbeat regime and it has the reputation for being that way.
And that's why the embargo even started. So, for those that don't know, the reason the embargo was first issued was because when Castro came to power, he expropriated American businesses that were there.
Stole American citizens' property. Stole American citizens' property. Expropriated
Expropriated,
is a sexy
stole.
word that socialists use in a Robin Hood type of context. If we're talking about, the five families of the New York Mafia and their casinos, like, okay, that's one thing, even though expropriating that did cost a lot of jobs. But for all the small landholders across the country, that was absolutely devastating, especially for the peasants who had their land taken from them and then were made to work on collective farms.
I love that story that of Fidel Castro. Which was the first farm he expropriated, Zach?
Oh, his dad's many thousands of acres estate, and Fidel's mom never forgave him for that. Fidel had a very interesting childhood. He was the son of a rich man. His parents were not married. His mother was a servant working on the estate, and his father was the boss. And he was like 30 years older than her. But, the guy, I'm not sure if he seduced her or if he used his influence and his power, to pressure her. But, they made some things happen, and three babies came out of that situation. One of them being named Raul, one of them being named Fidel, and another one nobody cares about because he never did anything important.
Oh, they
And
have.
then
It's a daughter. It's a
there
woman.
were three boys and then a girl.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
See,
so the
nobody.
third boy, he's not important because he never did anything. Well, I
I
guess even
mean,
the Castro family had to have their fail sons, right?
well,
Anyway,
we're talking about
so
the
rich
failures. I think that
father,
would be the good
servant mother, and then also Fidel was raised in his mom's little cabin. So he had open access to go play in the house when he wanted, but he lived in his mom's cabin. So what that did with his self image, I can't even tell, but you can see that because out of one side of his mouth, he's talking about Marxist theory and expropriating land from everybody and forcing people onto collective farms. Yeah, again, his father's estate was the very first one that he had the government expropriate. But then out of the other side of his mouth, there is an island in Cuba called Vilo Acuña. If you want to look it up, it's spelled Vilo, Vilo, and then Acuña, Acun with a tilde A. The only way to get there is by boat or by plane, and this is where Fidel and Raul's sons live. This is where the houses are really big. This is where people have the sports cars. This is where you see the yachts, these $800 million yachts docked there. That's the other side of Fidel, the dedicated Marxist. So whatever it was that weird cocktail that he grew up with as a child, you can see both of them playing out to equal extremes in the way that he lived his life and ran his country.
and you
And
see
you
it
know what's also interesting now? This I'm not going to extend this to the folks from the Libertarian Socialist Caucus. As a matter of fact, if there's any LibSocs who have been super uncomfortable during this episode and still watching, thank you. I'm very grateful to you guys for giving us an open mind. This is going to apply to the hardcore Leninists. So not your bottom unity folks, not the folks who are willing to take different approaches to anarchical socialism, but like specifically the Leninists and the tankies. I have yet to meet one of these folks who did not hate their father.
daddy issues.
Like, this is not an exaggeration. One of my close friends is still, we were friends from high school, and our politics converged in very different directions, but we still maintained an affection and we care about each other as human beings. So, one of my oldest friends in the world is a Marxist. I also, when I was doing my college political scene and hanging out with folks from other political movements, I dated socialist women. I dated Marxist women. I went to PSL meetings. I went to ISO meetings. I went to marches. Why did I go to all this stuff? Partly because I was very hungry to learn and just figure out where these people are coming from in their own words. But also because if I didn't go to some of these events, I wouldn't get no action later that night. So yeah, I did.
Way too much
I got to
information,
experience.
Zach. Way
I got to
too much
experience
information.
huge sections of the Leninists and the tankies in the American socialist circles. And again, I have yet to meet one of these folks who did not have a hostile or at least a very fractured relationship with their father. And Fidel is just another example.
That is absolutely a great theory, I think. But yeah, so we see this now with Fidel's grandchildren. You know, they live this lifestyle that nobody else in Cuba, or very few others in Cuba, I should say, because there is an elite section of Cuba in Havana. I was not privy to it prior. You know, nobody in my family in the other side of Cuba really is privy to that lifestyle. So there is a very well-to-do section of Cuba, and they have power and they have food and they have all the things that the regular Cubans don't have. And this is something that I think is just so important when we talk about communism, because we always hear, well, it wasn't tried well enough, or it wasn't done the right way. That was
real socialism.
I'm sorry? Socialism.
That wasn't real socialism.
Yeah, that wasn't real socialism. Like in Venezuela, that wasn't real socialism. And it's very funny to see right now in this situation, people that were claiming that Cuba is a socialist paradise right now are saying, oh no, that's not real socialism.
That's not real socialism. Which is funny because the DSA has been saying for years, no. What we're talking about is the Nordic countries. We're talking about Scandinavia. And then what's the first place that the DSA sends a delegation once COVID restrictions start getting lifted? Venezuela, to go hang out with Maduro. Not even like the dissident Chavismo parties, Democratic Chavismo. No. They're hanging out with the tankies.
But I mean, okay, all my hatred for Fidel aside, because I don't hate people generally, but I do this entity has I do detest him quite a bit, or his memory or whatever. But he was brilliant in all things that he did politically. Fidel was
an evil genius.
He was an evil genius. He's a Machiavellian, just evil genius. And so the just audacity of people, of socialists to say, that's not real socialist now, we're going to do it better, as if somehow Bernie Sanders or AOC is somehow smarter. I mean, come on, AOC studied economy and she couldn't even get issues on economics right. And this woman really thinks that she's going to do a better job than the evil genius of Fidel Castro in implementing socialist ideas. It is absolutely mind-blowing, the level of audacity they have to claim that they are superior or somehow will do it better. This time it'll really work.
This time it'll work.
This time,
it's like the old John McCain campaign ads when he's talking about funding for the wall, and he says, "This time it'll work." And I remember still being a Republican, going, "Really? Did you really just say that to me, John McCain?" This time it'll work.
This time it'll work. We have gone over our time here on the show, so I want to thank everybody for joining us. And for sharing this episode, for getting the word out on Cuba.
Real quick. If you have not done so, please go to Twitter and follow the handle Libertarios Cuba. For the Anglo ears, that's Libertarios Cuba. One word.
Libertarios Cuba, Zach?
Libertarios Cuba on Twitter.
But what is it?
Libertarians Cuba, that's what I mean. Oh, it's the Cuban LP Twitter account. So if you guys want a little bit, as the information comes in, if you guys want updates, that's the place to go. Libertarios Cuba on Twitter.
And again,
you can also look up the Cuban Libertarian Party on Facebook.
That as well. And again, thanks again to everyone for wanting to help Cuba, for keeping your eyes on Cuba, for retweeting, for sharing all this information. It is everybody that is paying attention to the situation, that is sharing the information, that is keeping people in Cuba alive. The Cuban government does not want to massacre people on TV, which is why they have cut off the internet and stuff like that.
Social media and the internet.
Absolutely. So
and the messaging apps.
Everything. So thank you to everybody keeping an eye on Cuba and what is going on there. It is because of everyone doing that I think we've been able to minimize the damage, and hopefully we can all reach out to our representatives here in the United States to remove Proclamation
6867.
And let's work on getting Americans the freedom to go do in Cuba what we'd like to do.
And the most important thing that we're communicating to you guys, because I don't want you to go to bed tonight and have CIA Tourette's. Nobody is saying send the 3rd Marine Division to Havana. We are saying, Uncle Sam, get the hell out of the way so that these ethnic Cubans can take food and medicine to their relatives.
That is exactly what we're saying. So thank you again, everybody, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.